Welcome back everyone. Today's story is What If Naruto Was an Undercover Detective at Konoha University? Part 1. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more Naruto What If stories and many more. Now sit back, relax and enjoy. In Chapter 1, The Shadows of Neon and Rain. The city of Konoha was no longer the sun-drenched sanctuary of legends. In the year 2026, it had transformed into a sprawling, suffocating megalopolis where the skyline was a jagged teeth of glass and steel, biting into a sky permanently bruised by industrial smog and the flickering neon of 1,000 advertisements. Below the gleaming penthouses of the elite lay the roots a labyrinth of rain-slicked alleyways and steam-venting sublevels where the law was merely a suggestion and survival was the only currency. While the world looked at Konoha as a beacon of technological advancement, a darker pulse beat beneath its surface. The crime rate hadn't just risen, it had evolved. It was no longer about simple muggings or street fights. The new era of criminality was sophisticated, silent, and systemic. High-end cybertheft, the distribution of experimental stimulants, and a burgeoning black market for restricted military-grade tech had turned the city into a chessboard for invisible players. In the slums of the Uchiha district, the red and blue lights of police cruisers were as common as street lamps, reflecting off puddles stained with oil and blood. The sirens provided a constant, dissonant soundtrack to a city that never truly slept, only drifted into a fitful, feverish trance. The police force, the Konoha Military Police Force, KMPF, fought a losing battle against the rising tide of the syndicate, a nameless entity that seemed to have its fingers in every legislative pocket and corporate boardroom. The most pressing concern for the KMPF wasn't the street-level chaos, but the corruption of the future. Reports had begun to surface of a massive smuggling ring operating out of the most prestigious institution in the country, Konoha University. It wasn't just contraband, it was the dust, a new synthetic substance that enhanced cognitive abilities at the cost of long-term neural degradation. It was spreading through the student body like a wildfire, and the source remained frustratingly elusive. High above the grime, in the reinforced ivory tower of the KMPF headquarters, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of old parchment and expensive tobacco. This was the office of Chief Commissioner Jiraiya. Jiraiya was a man who commanded respect without uttering a single word. Though his hair was a shock of unruly white, his eyes held the sharp, predatory intelligence of a man who had seen the worst of humanity and outlived it. He wasn't just a bureaucrat, he was a living legend, a former deep-cover operative who had dismantled cartels across 3 continents before taking the helm of the city's defense. His desk was a chaotic mountain of classified folders, half-empty ink bottles, and a singular, framed photo of his former pupils. A rhythmic, sharp knock echoed through the heavy oak door. Jiraiya didn't look up from the report he was reading. "Come in, Kakashi." Jiraiya's voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder. "You're 3 minutes late. I assume you were helping an elderly lady with her groceries again?" The door creaked open, and Kakashi Hatake stepped inside. Even in the presence of the commissioner, Kakashi maintained his trademark air of detached calm. His silver hair was swept to the side, and his face was partially obscured by a dark mask, a habit from his days in the special tactical units. He held a slim electronic tablet in his hand, his gaze focused on the man behind the desk. "Traffic was particularly chaotic near the university district, Commissioner," Kakashi replied smoothly, closing the door behind him. "The students are restless." Jiraiya sighed, finally leaning back in his leather chair. He gestured for Kakashi to sit. "Restless is an understatement. They're being poisoned. The latest seizure near the docks confirmed it. The chemical signature matches the samples we pulled from those overdose freshmen last week. The university isn't just a school anymore, it's a distribution hub." Kakashi's expression hardened. "The security on campus is tight, but it's private security. They're either incompetent or on the payroll. We've tried sending in standard surveillance, but these kids are tech-savvy and paranoid. They recognize a cop the moment he steps onto the quad. Which is why we stopped sending cops," Jiraiya said, his eyes narrowing. He stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the flickering lights of the city. "We need someone who can blend into the noise. Someone who doesn't look like they've spent a decade on the force. We need a ghost, Kakashi. Someone young enough to sit in a lecture hall without drawing a second glance, but sharp enough to dismantle a smuggling ring from the inside." Kakashi remained silent for a moment, the weight of the request hanging in the air. "You're talking about a long-term deep-cover assignment. That's a heavy burden for anyone." Jiraiya turned around, a grim smile playing on his lips. "I'm not looking for just anyone. I'm looking for someone who can ignore the distractions of university life, the parties, the fame, the social hierarchies, and keep their eyes on the prize. We need an unshakable asset. Do you have him ready? Kakashi nodded slowly, tapping his tablet to bring up a single, highly classified file. He's been waiting for your word. He's young, he's brilliant, and quite frankly, he's the only one I trust to handle the pressure of being a student by day and a hunter by night. Jiraiya looked at the file, the blue light of the screen reflecting in his eyes. Then it's settled. Let's see if he can survive the most dangerous place in Konoha, the social circles of the elite. The air in the high-security wing of the KMPF headquarters was filtered to a clinical chill, humming with the low-frequency vibration of server banks. Kakashi Hitake sat behind his desk, the surface a stark contrast to Jiraiya's chaotic workspace. Here, everything was digitized, streamlined, and cold. He leaned back, his eyes fixed on the door, counting the seconds. He didn't need a clock, he had a rhythm for these things. The heavy, reinforced door didn't creak. It swung open with a swift, silent efficiency that spoke of someone who moved through the world without leaving footprints. A young man stepped in. He was 22, but he carried an aura that felt decades older. He was strikingly handsome, possessing a refined, almost ethereal beauty that seemed out of place in the grid of the precinct. His skin was pale, flawless like polished ivory, and his hair was a vibrant, untamed gold that caught the overhead LED lights. He moved with a relaxed, predatory grace, clad in a simple black tactical jacket that hugged a frame honed by years of rigorous discipline. His eyes, a deep, piercing cerulean, were as flat and unreadable as a frozen lake. "You wanted me," the young man said. His voice was a calm, melodic baritone, devoid of any inflection. Kakashi let out a long, theatrical sigh, leaning his chin on his hand. "You know, Naruto, most people start with a knock. It's a basic social construct designed to prevent people from seeing things they shouldn't. You're incredibly rude, you know that?" Naruto didn't blink. He didn't shift his weight. He simply stood in the center of the room, his gaze fixed on a point just above Kakashi's head. He was a statue of flesh and bone, completely unaffected by the reprimand. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating, but Naruto seemed perfectly comfortable inhabiting it. "Still nothing?" Kakashi prompted, his voice tilting into a teasing register. "No sorry, Captain, or I'll try harder next time. You really lack a sense of humor, don't you? It's a tragedy, truly. A face like yours should be smiling at girls, not staring down criminals in dark alleys." Naruto remained a void. No frown, no smirk, no spark of annoyance. Fine, Kakashi muttered, reaching into his desk drawer and pulling out a small, worn book with a bright red cover, the infamous Makeout Paradise. "Maybe you just need a little adult stimulation to jumpstart those emotions. Listen to this one. It's a classic." Kakashi cleared his throat and began to read a passage with exaggerated passion. The text was shamelessly lewd, detailing a clandestine encounter between a nurse and a wandering swordsman in a moonlit hot spring. He read the most graphic descriptions with a straight face, lingering on the adjectives, trying to provoke even a sliver of a blush or a flash of discomfort from the young detective. He described the heaving bosoms and glistening skin with the dedication of a theater actor. When he finished the passage, he looked up expectantly. Naruto's expression was identical to when he had entered the room. His pulse, visible at the base of his throat, hadn't sped up by a single beat. He looked at the book as if it were a technical manual for a water pump. "That is biologically improbable," Naruto stated flatly. "The friction described would result in second-degree burns." Kakashi groaned, dropping the book onto the desk with a thud. He rubbed his temples, feeling a genuine headache forming. "You're impossible. I try to lighten the mood with a bit of culture, and you give me a physics lesson. Do you even have blood in your veins, or is it just liquid nitrogen?" He watched Naruto closely, looking for a twitch of a lip or a tightening of the jaw. Nothing. Naruto's calm was absolute, a psychological fortress that Kakashi had never been able to breach. It was what made him the best undercover asset in the history of the Force, but it also made him the most frustrating subordinate to talk to. "You're a machine, Naruto," Kakashi said, his tone shifting from playful to somber. He stood up, walking around the desk until he was standing directly in front of the younger man. Even at this proximity, Naruto didn't recoil. He didn't even blink. "But perhaps that's exactly what we need for this. The world is getting messy, and I need someone who doesn't get dirty when they walk through the mud." Kakashi leaned in, his single visible eye narrowing as he studied the blonde detective. He looked for a soul behind those blue eyes, but all he saw was a mirror reflecting his own tired face. "I didn't bring you here to critique my reading material," Kakashi whispered, his voice dropping to a serious, authoritative tone. He let out a final, heavy sigh, one that seemed to carry the weight of the entire city's problems. "I've brought you a mission. Something unique. Something that's going to require every bit of that icy composure of yours." He paused, letting the silence build one last time, though he knew Naruto wasn't feeling the suspense. "Get ready, Naruto. This one is going to be interesting." The sterile lights of the office hummed overhead, casting a sharp glow over the digital maps of Konoha University that now flickered onto the wall screen. Kakashi tapped a command on his console, and the blueprints of the campus sprawled out in glowing blue lines. "Your objective is simple in theory, yet exhausting in practice," Kakashi began, his voice losing its playful edge. "You are to enroll as a transfer student in the Faculty of Criminal Justice. You'll live in the dorms, attend lectures, and participate in the vibrant campus life. Underneath that, you are to identify the primary distribution nodes of the dust and find out which faculty members or high-profile students are facilitating the shipments." Naruto's eyes shifted toward the screen, scanning the layout of the university with a cold, analytical speed. For the first time since entering the room, he spoke more than a sentence, and his voice was laced with a rare, crystalline frost. "No." Kakashi blinked, his hand pausing over the controls. "Excuse me? I am a detective, not a babysitter for pampered elite," Naruto said, his tone flat but heavy with conviction. "Sending me to a university is a waste of departmental resources. My skill set is optimized for high-stakes interception and tactical extraction. I don't blend with civilians who spend their days debating aesthetics and their nights in a drunken stupor. Find someone else." Kakashi straightened his back, letting out a dry laugh that lacked any real mirth. "It wasn't a request, Naruto. It's a direct order from the chief commissioner himself. You're the only operative with a clean enough record and a young enough face to pull this off. You have no choice." Naruto turned his head slowly, his cerulean eyes locking onto Kakashi's with a sudden, predatory intensity. It was a gaze that had made hardened killers confess in interrogation rooms, a sharp, unwavering stare that felt like a blade pressed against the throat. Kakashi felt a bead of sweat prickle at his temple. He laughed nervously, waving a hand in the air as if trying to brush away the tension. "Come on, now. Don't look at me like I've sentenced you to death. It's a university. Think about it. It's a change of pace. You'll wear normal clothes, hoodies, jeans, things that don't smell like gunpowder. And who knows? Maybe you'll actually find a beautiful girl. The campus is famous for them, some of the most stunning women in the country are enrolled there. It might be good for you too. Interact with someone who doesn't have a criminal record." Naruto's gaze didn't soften. If anything, his eyes narrowed, his silence becoming a physical weight in the room. The temperature seemed to drop 5 degrees. "You're doing it again," Kakashi said, his laugh turning even more strained. He took a half step back, adjusting his mask. "You're staring at me as if you're the one in charge here. I'm the captain, remember? I'm your superior officer. You're supposed to say yes, sir, and salute, not look like you're calculating the fastest way to break my ribs." Naruto didn't acknowledge the joke. "I have no interest in beautiful girls or social interactions. They are variables that create instability in an investigation." "Which is exactly why you're perfect," Kakashi countered, recovering his composure. "The people running this ring expect a certain level of greed, or lust, or ego. You have none of those. You're a ghost in the machine. You'll wear the student uniform, carry the books, and sit in the back of the class. You'll be the quiet, handsome mystery student that everyone wonders about, but nobody truly knows." Kakashi walked over to a locker and pulled out a duffel bag, tossing it onto the desk. It landed with a soft thud. "And there is your new life. High-end civilian clothing, a student ID that passed every biometric check, and a smartphone rigged with an encrypted link to this office. No weapons unless absolutely necessary. You are a civilian now, Naruto. A student of law and order." Naruto looked down at the bag, his expression as unreadable as a blank page. He didn't reach for it immediately. He stood there, a silent protest in human form, before finally reaching out and gripping the strap. "I will find the source," Naruto said, his voice low and dangerous. "And when I do, I expect to be pulled out the same hour. I won't play act as a student a second longer than required." Kakashi smiled, though it stayed hidden behind his mask. He gave a mock salute, his eye crinkling with a hint of his usual mischief. "Understood, Mr. Uzumaki. Now, go home, change out of those tactical boots, and try to look like someone who actually enjoys being alive. Your first lecture is at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Prepare yourself, detective. The ivory tower is waiting." The heavy doors closed behind Naruto, leaving a silence in the hallway that felt unnaturally still. Inside the office, the tension that had held the room captive seemed to dissipate, replaced by the low hum of the air filtration system. Jiraiya, who had been watching the interaction through the tinted glass of the observation deck above, stepped down the spiral staircase. His heavy boots thudded against the metal, a stark contrast to the silent exit of the young detective. Jiraiya stood in the center of the room, his arms crossed over his broad chest. He stared at the closed door, his brow furrowed in deep thought. He looked like a man weighing the fate of the city on a very thin scale. "He's a cold one, Kakashi," Jiraiya rumbled, his voice echoing in the sterile office. "I've seen deep cover operatives before, men who could turn their emotions off like a light switch, but that kid. He doesn't even seem to have a switch. He's like a glacier moving through a desert. Are you sure about this? He's bleak, he's detached, and frankly, he's gloomy. This mission requires a certain level of social lubrication. He might just fail if he can't find a way to actually talk to people without making them feel like they're being interrogated by a statue." Kakashi leaned back against his desk, a relaxed, almost lazy posture that hid his sharp focus. He reached for his book again but didn't open it, instead turning it over in his hands. "You're misreading him, Commissioner," Kakashi said, a light chuckle vibrating in his chest. "Naruto isn't gloomy, he's focused. His lack of emotional baggage isn't a weakness, it's his greatest armor. In a place like Konoha University, where everyone is screaming for attention, a man who says nothing is the most fascinating thing in the room. He won't have to seek out the targets. They'll be drawn to him like moths to a very cold, blue flame." Jiraiya sighed, pacing the length of the room. "The university isn't a battlefield, Kakashi. It's a hive of ego and hormones. If he doesn't play the part, he'll stand out for the wrong reasons. I need someone who can infiltrate the inner circles, not someone who sits in the corner looking like he's planning a tactical strike on the cafeteria." "Trust me," Kakashi replied, his eye crinkling as he smiled behind the mask. "I have absolute confidence in him. He's exactly 22, the perfect age. He's technically their peer, even if his mind is 10 years ahead of them. He has the look, the age, and that mysterious aura that college students find irresistible. In fact, I'm willing to place a wager." Jiraiya stopped pacing and looked at him. "A wager?" "By the time this investigation is over," Kakashi said, his tone turning playful, "not only will he have dismantled that smuggling ring, but he'll probably come out of there married. There are girls at that university who are in a league of their own, highly intelligent, incredibly beautiful, and used to getting what they want. They've never met someone like Naruto. He won't know what hit him. He might start the mission as a lone wolf, but he'll end it with a ring on his finger and a very different perspective on social variables." Jiraiya barked out a laugh, a loud, booming sound that shook the tension from the air. "Naruto? Married? The boy doesn't even know how to flirt with a chair. He'd probably treat a date like a witness deposition." "That's the beauty of it," Kakashi said, standing up and stretching his arms. "He won't try. And that's exactly why he'll succeed. He's the most dangerous man we have because he doesn't care about being liked. And in a world where everyone wants to be liked, he is king." Jiraiya shook his head, though a small, appreciative smirk touched his lips. "I hope you're right, Kakashi. For the city's sake, and for his. Let's see if the unshakable Naruto survives his first day of higher education." "He'll do more than survive," Kakashi murmured, looking at the empty doorway. "He'll conquer it. Get ready, Commissioner. The show is about to begin." Chapter 2, The Golden Sovereign of Konoha U. The morning sun over Konoha University did not merely rise, it performed, casting a brilliant, expensive-looking amber glow over the sprawling campus. This was not a place for the average or the uninspired. The architecture was a seamless blend of traditional Neo-Edo elegance and glass-paneled futurism. Manicured lawns, vibrant with cherry blossoms that seemed to bloom with artificial perfection, stretched between lecture halls that resembled high-end art galleries. The air itself smelled of luxury, a mixture of expensive perfumes, imported espresso, and the crisp, clean scent of wealth. It was the premier institution for the children of the elite, the heirs to corporate empires, and the future architects of the city's destiny. At exactly 8:15 a.m., the atmosphere of the main plaza shifted. It was a subtle, rhythmic change in the crowd's movement, like water parting for a predatory shark of unimaginable beauty. Ino Yamanaka stepped onto the polished marble walkway. She was a vision of calculated perfection. Her long, platinum blonde hair cascaded down her back like a river of spun silk, swaying in perfect time with her stride. She wore a tailored, high-waisted lavender skirt that accentuated the curve of her hips, paired with a sleeveless cream silk blouse that clung to her frame with breathless precision. On her feet were designer heels that clicked against the stone with the authority of a metronome. Her skin was flawless, glowing with the radiance of someone who had never known a day of true hardship. Behind her designer sunglasses, her pale blue eyes held a gaze of supreme indifference. She didn't look at the world was merely the backdrop for her existence. As she moved, a wake of longing and desperation followed her. To the young men of Konoha University, Ino was more than the most popular girl on campus. She was a goddess, a challenge, and an obsession. Groups of students, some the sons of senators and tech moguls, practically tripped over themselves to enter her orbit. Ino. Good morning. I got you that limited edition latte you mentioned on your story, one boy stammered, rushing to her side with a trembling cup. He was dressed in a suit that cost more than a mid-sized car, yet he looked like a beggar in her presence. Ino didn't stop. She didn't even turn her head. It's lukewarm, she said, her voice a melodic but razor-sharp blade. And I changed my mind about caffeine 6 minutes ago. Dispose of it. The boy wilted, his face flushing a deep crimson as his friend snickered, yet even as he was humiliated, he couldn't take his eyes off the sway of her hair. Another student, a star athlete with a physique carved from granite, stepped into her path with a wide, confident grin. Hey, Ino. I've got front row tickets to the gala tonight. My car is picking me up at 7. You're coming with me. Ino stopped then, slowly lowering her sunglasses to look him up and down. The silence was deafening. She looked at him not as a peer, but as a particularly dull insect. Your confidence is almost as loud as your cologne, she remarked, her lip curling into a sneer of pure, unfiltered disdain. The answer is no. Not tonight, not in this lifetime, and certainly not with someone who thinks a front row ticket is a personality trait. Move. You're blocking the sun. The athlete's bravado vanished instantly. He stepped aside, bowing his head instinctively, crushed by the weight of her rejection yet still watching her with a hunger that bordered on the pathetic. This was the daily ritual of Konoha University. Ino Yamanaka walked, and the world knelt. She treated the male population with a cold, systematic cruelty that only seemed to fuel their desire. She was the diva of the roots, the girl who had everything and found everyone else lacking. She thrived on the power, on the way they groveled and pleaded for a single glance. To her, the university was her kingdom, and every boy in it was just another servant she hadn't bothered to learn the name of yet. She moved toward the great hall, a slight, satisfied smirk touching her lips, unaware that the unshakable variable was about to enter her perfect, controlled world. The tension in the central plaza was thick enough to choke the life out of the morning breeze. As Ino Yamanaka stood at the center of her adoring, pathetic court, a shadow fell across the marble. Emerging from the crowd was Sakura Haruno, her pink hair a sharp, defiant contrast to the sea of luxury. Sakura clutched her textbooks to her chest, her emerald eyes burning with a mixture of resentment and deep-seated rivalry that spanned years. For Sakura, Ino wasn't just a popular girl, she was a constant reminder of everything superficial about Konoha University. The two stood frozen for a moment, the social titan versus the studious underdog. Oh, look everyone, Ino's voice rang out, dripping with the sugary venom that made the boys around her titter in anticipation. The library has finally released its most dedicated prisoner. Honestly, Sakura, do you ever stop trying to compensate for that forehead with extra credit? The crowd erupted into a chorus of sycophantic laughter. Sakura's knuckles turned white around her books. At least I'm here to get an education, Ino, not to collect a fan club of brainless lapdogs who can't see past your hair dye. Ino didn't flinch. Instead, she took a step closer, her heels clicking like the countdown of a bomb. She turned to the crowd, gesturing towards Sakura with a hand that sparkled with expensive rings. You see this? This is what happens when you have no style and even less ambition. You'll spend 4 years in the shadows, Sakura, and 40 more as a miserable assistant to people like me. You'll always be the girl standing behind the girl everyone actually looks at. You're a background character in a world I own. The humiliation was a physical weight. The students, desperate to stay in Ino's good graces, joined in the mockery, pointing and whispering. Sakura stood her ground, though a shimmer of moisture threatened the corners of her eyes. She hated Ino, hated her ease, her power, and the way she manipulated everyone like puppets on a string. Suddenly, a heavy, authoritative presence cut through the noise. The laughter died in a jagged instant. Walking toward them was Professor Asuma Sarutobi. He was a man who exuded a rugged, effortless command, a cigarette unlit in the corner of his mouth and his hands deep in the pockets of his dark blazer. Asuma wasn't just any lecturer, he was a titan of the faculty, a man whose reputation for toughness was legendary. "That's enough," Asuma said, his voice a low, vibrating growl that settled over the plaza like a fog. "The university is a place of learning, not a playground for your petty ego trips, Miss Yamanaka. And the rest of you, get to class before I decide your grades need AIR evaluation for conduct." The crowd dispersed instantly, the boys scurrying away like frightened mice. Even Ino straightened her posture, her defiant smirk fading into a mask of polite boredom, though her eyes still shot sparks at Sakura. Asuma scanned the remaining group, his sharp gaze lingering on the entrance of the main lecture hall. The atmosphere changed, the air felt suddenly still, as if the university itself was holding its breath for what came next. "Settle down," Asuma commanded, looking toward the heavy oak doors where a figure was silhouetted against the morning light. "I've been informed of a change to our roster. We are beginning the term with an addition to the criminal justice program." He paused, a rare, knowing glint appearing in his eyes as the golden-haired figure stepped fully into the shade of the portico. "Everyone, meet our new dot." The heavy oak doors of the lecture hall swung open, and for the second time that morning, the air in the room underwent a violent shift. But this wasn't the practiced elegance of Ino, this was something raw, cold, and utterly indifferent. Naruto stepped into the room. He was wearing a simple, charcoal gray button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms that looked like they were corded with steel. His attire was unremarkable, yet on his frame, it looked like a high-fashion statement. His pale skin seemed to catch the light, and his golden hair, messy and unstyled, gave him the look of a fallen angel who had just finished a fight. He didn't look around. He didn't smile. His face was set in a mask of profound boredom, his brow slightly furrowed in a permanent scowl that radiated a sense of "I don't want to be here." The silence that followed his entrance was absolute. Every girl in the room, including the ones who had been laughing at Ino's jokes seconds ago, felt a collective catch in their breath. He was moose, strikingly handsome, in a way that felt dangerous, a stark contrast to the pampered boys they were used to. Asuma, leaning against his podium, studied the newcomer with a keen interest. "You're late for your first day," Asuma noted, though there was no malice in his voice. "If you're going to join the elite of the Criminal Justice Department, you might want to start with a name." Naruto stopped in the middle of the aisle, his hands shoved into his pockets. He didn't look at Asuma, instead staring at the chalkboard as if it were an enemy. "Naruto," he said. The name was short, clipped, and devoid of any warmth. "Just Naruto?" Asuma prompted, raising an eyebrow. "Fine. Well, Naruto, this is a class for people with vision. The future leaders of law. So tell us. What are your ambitions? What are your dreams for the future?" Naruto finally turned his head, his icy blue eyes meeting Asuma's. A look of genuine disgust flickered across his face, as if the very word dream was an insult to his intelligence. "I don't have ambitions," he stated flatly, his voice echoing in the silent hall. "And I don't have dreams." A gasp rippled through the room. In a university where everyone was obsessed with legacy and future, his nihilism was like a cold splash of water. "Over here, Naruto. There's a seat next to me." A girl from the third row whispered loudly, patting the empty chair beside her. "No, come sit here." Another called out, tucking her hair behind her ear and leaning forward. The women in the room were practically preening, trying to catch the eye of the mysterious, brooding blonde. Except for Ino. Ino Yamanaka watched him with a calculated intensity. She felt a surge of irritation. How could someone so handsome be so lifeless? She decided, right then and there, to break him. It was her duty as the queen of the campus. She shifted in her seat, crossing her long legs slowly, letting one heel dangle off her foot. She leaned back, arching her neck to let her blonde hair fall over her shoulder, and fixed him with a gaze that had brought billionaires to their knees. She didn't say a word, but her entire body was a siren song of invitation. Naruto's gaze swept over the room. His eyes passed over Ino as if she were a piece of furniture, no, worse, as if she were a blur in his peripheral vision that didn't even deserve focus. Without a word of acknowledgement to her or the other girls, he began walking up the stairs. He ignored the perfume, the smiles, and the desperate whispers. He kept walking until he reached the row where Sakura Haruno sat, still fuming and isolated from the rest. Without asking permission, and without even looking at her, Naruto pulled out the chair next to Sakura and sat down. He slumped slightly in his seat, staring straight ahead at the podium, completely oblivious to the fact that he had just committed the ultimate social sin, ignoring the queen to sit with the outcast. The room was silent. Ino's face turned a shade of crimson that clashed horribly with her lavender skirt. Sakura blinked, looking at the stone-faced boy next to her in utter shock. "Let's begin," Asuma said, a small, hidden smirk playing on his lips. "We have a lot of work to do." The atmosphere in the lecture hall was suffocatingly tense. While Professor Asuma began droning on about the evolution of penal codes, the real drama was unfolding in the silence of the rows. Sakura Haruno felt a strange, electric heat radiating from the person sitting next to her. She stole a glance at Naruto. Up close, his profile was even more intimidating, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his golden hair fell over his brow, and those eyes that seemed to be looking through the walls rather than at them. He sat with a rigid, military stillness, his hands folded on the desk, not even bothering to take out a notebook or a pen. She cleared her throat, her heart fluttering with a mix of curiosity and nervousness. "I'm Sakura," she whispered, leaning slightly toward him. "It's a bold move, what you said to Asuma. Most people here spend hours rehearsing their dreams just to impress the faculty." Naruto didn't turn his head. His gaze remained fixed on the front of the room, cold and unwavering. He didn't offer a name in return, nor a smile. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. "You really look like you'd rather be anywhere else," Sakura tried again, her voice a bit more persistent. "You have this look on your face. Like the air in here is toxic. Why are you even here if you hate it so much? Is it family pressure? A scholarship?" Finally, Naruto moved. He turned his head slowly, his cerulean eyes locking onto hers. There was no warmth in them, only a crushing, analytical weight that made her feel like she was being scanned by a high-tech sensor. "It's not your concern," he said. His voice was a low, flat rasp that sent a chill down her spine. "I'm here because I have to be. Beyond that, my reasons don't involve you." Sakura's face flushed a deep, indignant scarlet. She had expected him to be cool or mysterious, but this was pure, unadulterated coldness. You're incredibly rude," she hissed, her emerald eyes flashing with anger. "I was just trying to be a decent human being. You don't have to be so blunt." Naruto didn't even acknowledge her frustration. He simply turned his gaze back to the podium, dismissing her existence as quickly as he had acknowledged it. 2 rows down, Ino Yamanaka was a portrait of simmering fury. She wasn't listening to a word of Asuma's lecture. Instead, she was gripping her designer pen so hard it threatened to snap. She had seen the whole interaction, or lack thereof. She had watched as Naruto sat next to Forehead Girl and then watched as he treated her like a nuisance. But what stung the most was the initial rejection. He hadn't even looked at her. He hadn't noticed the hair, the perfume, or the calculated pose. To a girl who was used to being the sun that everyone else orbited, Naruto was a black hole that swallowed her light without a trace. He's distracted, Ino whispered to herself, her eyes narrowing as she watched the back of his blonde head. Maybe the lighting was wrong. Maybe he was so intimidated by me that he couldn't even look in my direction. Yeah, that has to be it. He's probably terrified of how beautiful I am. She bit her lip, her competitive spirit roaring to life. No one ignored Ino Yamanaka. No one. She watched him for the rest of the hour, her mind already spinning a web of how she would corner him, break that icy exterior, and make him regret the second he chose to sit next to Sakura Haruno instead of her. Naruto, meanwhile, sat in total silence, his mind miles away from the social games of college students, focused only on the mission in the hidden shadows he was sent to find. The lecture hall emptied into the bright, airy corridors of the university, a sea of students chattering about weekend plans and fashion. Amidst the flow, Naruto walked with a rhythmic, purposeful stride that seemed to cut through the crowd like a prow of a ship. He didn't look left or right, his mind was already mapping the security cameras and exit routes of the building. "Wait up. Hey, I'm talking to you." Sakura struggled to keep pace with him, her heels clicking rapidly on the linoleum. She was gesturing wildly, pointing toward the sprawling cafeteria complex visible through the glass walls. That's the South Wing, where the law students hang out. If you want to get anywhere here, you need to know the hierarchy. It's not just about grades, Naruto. It's about who you know. Naruto didn't even turn his head. He was staring at a janitor's closet, wondering if the lock was standard or electronic. To him, Sakura's voice was merely background noise, the chirping of a persistent bird. Frustration boiled over in Sakura. She had never been so thoroughly ignored in her life. In a sudden fit of pique, she reached up and sharply yanked a lock of his golden hair. Naruto's reaction was instantaneous. He stopped dead, his body tensing into a defensive posture, his eyes flashing with a sudden, dangerous spark of annoyance. He looked at her as if she had just pulled a pin on a grenade. "Don't touch me," he hissed, his voice like the grinding of tectonic plates. "Then listen," Sakura snapped, placing her hands on her hips. "I'm trying to help you. You're new, you're weird, and you're going to get eaten alive by people like Ino if you don't have allies. You need friends. Social capital is everything here. And, well, I wouldn't mind being your first friend. I can show you the ropes." Naruto straightened his shirt, his expression returning to its mask of cold indifference. "I don't want friends. And I certainly don't want to be yours. I'm not here for social capital. I'm here for a purpose that doesn't include you." Sakura's face turned a violent shade of crimson. You are beyond rude. You're socially stunted. You lack the most basic human communication skills. It's a miracle you even know how to use a fork." She stepped closer, her emerald eyes narrowing with a new resolve. "Fine. If you're this much of a disaster, I'll make you my project. I'm going to teach you how to be a person." "I don't need a teacher," Naruto muttered, beginning to walk again. "Don't be stupid, Naruto." Sakura lunged forward and grabbed his arm, pulling his hand toward her. In her earnestness to stop him, she tucked his hand firmly under her arm, pressing it against the soft curve of her side, just beneath her chest, as she leaned in to lecture him. "You're going to be my project, and that's final. You'll thank me when you're not eating lunch alone in a stairwell." Naruto felt the warmth and softness of her body against his hand, but instead of the reaction most men would have, he felt a wave of pure irritation. He felt trapped, distracted, and, most of all, furious at the person who had sent him here. "I'm going to kill that silver-haired idiot when I get back," Naruto thought, his jaw tightening as he envisioned Kakashi's lazy smile. He knew this would happen. He's probably laughing right now. "Who are you talking about?" Sakura asked, noticing his murderous expression. "Who are you cursing under your breath?" "Nobody," Naruto snapped, wrenching his hand away from her grip with a sharp, decisive motion. He stepped back, putting several feet of distance between them. "Just stay out of my way." He turned and disappeared into the crowd of the cafeteria, leaving Sakura standing there, huffing with indignation and nursing a strangely racing heart. From a balcony overlooking the hall, Ino Yamanaka watched the entire exchange. She gripped the railing, her knuckles white, her eyes fixed on the spot where Naruto had been standing. A cold, predatory smile slowly spread across her face as she watched Sakura's frustrated silhouette. "Enjoy it while it lasts, forehead," Ino whispered into the wind, her voice dripping with malice. "Because once I decide to step in, he won't even remember your name." The cafeteria was a sprawling cathedral of glass and high-end catering, smelling of expensive roasted beans and sea salt caramel. Naruto stood near a vending terminal, his posture rigid, looking at the menu with the same intensity he would use to scan a bomb's wiring. "Oh, come on," Sakura chirped, stepping into his space and nudging him toward the gourmet sandwich station. "You've been staring at the screen for 3 minutes. A gentleman would have already offered to buy me lunch. You wouldn't make a girl as pretty as me pay for her own meal on her first day as your guide, would you?" Naruto's jaw tightened. The pretty girl logic was a social currency he refused to recognize. He looked at her, his blue eyes cold and flat. "I didn't ask for a guide. And I'm not a gentleman." "You're a headache is what you are," Sakura huffed, crossing her arms. "Fine, skip the food if you want to starve, but at least get us some drinks. My throat is parched from explaining the faculty hierarchy to your stone ears." Naruto let out a long, weary sigh, the kind of sound a man makes when he realizes the fastest way to end a conflict is to simply surrender to the absurdity. He tapped the screen with sharp, mechanical movements, swiping his encrypted departmental card. He grabbed 2 chilled bottles of electrolyte water and handed one to her without a word, his expression one of pure, unadulterated boredom. Across the crowded hall, perched on a sleek, high-top table, Kiba Inuzuka narrowed his eyes. His signature leather jacket was open, and his foot tapped restlessly against the metal chair leg. Beside him sat Shino Aburame, draped in his usual high-collared coat, his eyes hidden behind dark lenses as he adjusted a small electronic device. "See that?" Kiba hissed, gesturing toward Naruto. "The new guy. He's been on campus for 3 hours and he's already got the forehead orbiting him. If he keeps that brooding, mysterious act up, he's gonna catch Ino's eye. And that's a problem." Shino didn't look up from his screen. "There are approximately 4,000 female students on this campus, Kiba. The probability of one newcomer disrupting your chances with one specific girl is statistically manageable. You are overreacting." "You don't get it, Shino." Kiba groaned, leaning back and running a hand through his hair. "Ino isn't just any girl. She's the girl. She's the hottest thing to ever walk these halls." Kiba's eyes glazed over as he looked toward the table where Ino was sitting with her entourage. His imagination began to run wild, fueled by a mixture of hormones and obsession. He could see it clearly, Ino in one of her skin-tight lavender outfits, the way the fabric hugged her curves and emphasized her bust. He imagined her leaning over a desk, her long blonde hair brushing against his face as she whispered his name. "Oh, Kiba," his imagination Ino cooed, her voice a sultry purr. "You're the only real man in this school. Forget those moody blondes. Come here, my love." He could almost feel her soft, perfect skin and the weight of her leaning against him. "You're drooling," Shino said flatly, his voice cutting through Kiba's fantasy like a serrated knife. "And your heart rate has increased by 20%. You are an idiot." Kiba snapped out of it, wiping his mouth and scowling. "Shut up, Shino. I'm serious. That new guy. Naruto? He doesn't know the rules here. He thinks he can just walk in and be the alpha? I'm gonna have to teach him how we do things in Konoha." The atmosphere in the cafeteria shifted from a dull roar to a sharp, expectant silence as Naruto walked back toward the table, clutching the drinks with a grip that threatened to shatter the plastic. Every step he took felt like a chore, a heavy tax on his patience. His brow was furrowed in a permanent scowl, his thoughts a dark whirlpool of resentment toward the mission and the silver-haired man who had assigned it. Kiba Inuzuka watched him approach, a jagged, arrogant smirk stretching across his face. As Naruto passed his table, Kiba casually kicked his foot out, his heavy boot catching Naruto's ankle with calculated precision. The trip was sudden. Naruto, caught in the middle of a mental curse against the KMPF, stumbled forward. The bottles of electrolyte water flew from his hands, skidding across the polished floor, and Naruto hit the ground with a dull thud. The cafeteria erupted. A few students gasped, but most let out a cruel, mocking ripple of laughter. "Watch your step, pretty boy," Kiba barked, leaning back in his chair with a triumphant grin. "Maybe they don't teach you how to walk where you came from. This is a university, not a runway." Sakura was on her feet in an instant, her chair screeching against the floor. She didn't hesitate, stepping between Naruto and the mocking crowd. "You absolute pig, Kiba!" she screamed, her voice vibrating with a raw, unbridled fury. "Do you have any idea how pathetic you look? You're a third-year student acting like a toddler in a sandbox. You have zero respect, zero class, and you're a total piece of trash." Kiba's smirk faltered for a second under the weight of her verbal assault. "Relax, forehead. It was just a joke. Maybe he should pay more attention to the world around him." "It's not a joke, you brainless dog," Sakura snapped, her eyes flashing green fire. She knelt down beside Naruto, pulling a silk handkerchief from her bag. "Are you okay? Here, let me get that." She began dabbing at a smudge on his charcoal shirt, her hands trembling with protective rage. Naruto didn't look at her. He didn't look at the handkerchief. He rose from the floor with a slow, mechanical grace that felt predatory. The air around him seemed to thicken, the temperature dropping until the students nearby felt a genuine chill. The unshakable mask hadn't just cracked, it had disintegrated. "Hey, I'm talking to you, loser," Kiba said, standing up to face him, emboldened by the audience. "What's the matter? Did I hurt your feelings? You gonna cry for your—" The sentence never finished. In a blur of motion that no civilian eye could track, Naruto's fist connected with Kiba's jaw. The sound was like a whip cracking, a sickening thwack that echoed off the high ceilings. Kiba didn't just stumble, he was launched off his feet, his body spinning through the air before crashing into a nearby lunch table, sending trays and salads flying. The laughter died instantly. The entire cafeteria froze. Naruto wasn't finished. He crossed the distance in 2 strides, reaching down and grabbing Kiba by the collar of his leather jacket. He hauled him up with one hand, his strength defying his lean frame. With a snarl of pure, focused rage, Naruto slammed Kiba face down onto a long cafeteria table. He didn't use a weapon. He used the environment. Naruto began dragging Kiba's face across the length of the table, through pools of spilled soup, mashed potatoes, and discarded sauce. Kiba tried to scramble, to fight back, but Naruto's grip was like an iron vice. He was using Kiba like a rag to clean the table, his movements fueled by every ounce of frustration he felt for this babysitting mission. "Is this what you wanted to see?" Naruto hissed, punctuating each word by slamming Kiba's head back down onto the wood. The students, initially shocked, began to cheer. The diva's lapdog was finally being put in his place. But the cheer was short-lived as they realized Naruto wasn't stopping. He was a whirlwind of calculated violence, his eyes glowing with a terrifying, icy light. "Security! Get him off him!" Someone screamed. 4 campus security guards rushed into the fray, grabbing Naruto's arms and waist. It took all of them, straining and shouting, to pull him away from a gasping, sauce-covered, and bruised Kiba. Naruto didn't struggle against the guards, he simply stood there, his chest heaving, staring at the floor with a gaze that could burn through steel. He was vibrating with a silent, tectonic fury, not at Kiba, but at the fact that he had lost control. "Get him out of here!" The lead guard shouted, dragging Naruto toward the exit. Sakura stood amidst the wreckage, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and profound admiration. As Naruto was led away, she couldn't help it, she let out a triumphant laugh, jumping slightly in place. "That was incredible," she whispered to herself, her heart hammering against her ribs. The female students in the room were whispering frantically, their eyes fixed on Naruto's retreating back with a new, intense hunger. He wasn't just handsome anymore, he was a force of nature. Shino Aburame walked over to where Kiba was groaning on the floor, covered in ranch dressing and shame. Shino adjusted his glasses, looking down at his friend with a clinical, detached pity. "I told you, Kiba," Shino said softly. "You have placed yourself in an undesirable position. You didn't just lose a fight, you became his pedestal. You've made him the most famous man on campus." On the balcony above, Ino Yamanaka stood perfectly still. She had watched the entire explosion from start to finish. Her sunglasses were lowered, and for the first time, her pale blue eyes weren't filled with disdain. They were wide, focused, and shimmering with a dangerous new interest. She watched the guards pull Naruto out of the hall, her tongue darting out to lick her lower lip. Finally, Ino whispered, a slow, predatory smile blooming on her face. "Someone worth breaking." This is the end of part 1. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe. And do comment below for part 2.